Good afternoon, everyone. Rich Sutter and Pete Coles here with you. We are in the zone today, folks. Middle of July. It's scorching outside.
Yes, it is.
Pete has decided to take a trip to Florida in the middle of July. And so he got the buzz cut ready. He's fired up. That's the haircut I wanted all summer, but I didn't have the nerve to do since we started having the show. I didn't want to scare any of our fans. I didn't want to scare anybody. If I took all the hair off my head, it might create a bit of a sight for people that they could not get accustomed to. So we're going to keep the hair on now. But in the summer, Pete, I have done the buzz cut. It's certainly the move. Certainly heading into the heat of Florida. Certainly, the great move to make. So good luck on your trip. We're going to adjust our schedule around some of that. And did want to start off the week. We're going to go right into Feed 'em Fish. We had a great week last week. The tribute to Coach Burns was so well responded to by so many of his players. I just wanted to give a shout out to all of the people who got in touch with me. Thank you. We appreciate it. And we do remember Coach Burns, and we will practice remembrance. The next piece in Feed 'em Fish, I wanted to let our viewers know that I've seen a little bit of the future this week, and I wanted to start off our show with that. The future of basketball comes when you look at the young players who are now emerging onto the floor, coming onto the forum, and they're carving their own journey. And these days, it seems like great players are just popping up from all over the place. You know, if you have Victor Wembanyama coming from France and a lot of the other different draftees that have just recently drafted. You see that the NBA is certainly taking its players from an international pot, certainly taking it from all different areas of basketball, and that's truly representational of the world that we live in, and that's cool. So I wanted to start off Feed 'em Fish because what we're going to about to see doesn't happen all the time, and so I wanted to take a little bit of a notice of it. The current number one player in the country is a gentleman by the name of Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg is tremendous. He is, I cannot find right now, for a gentleman of his age, a weakness that he possesses on the basketball court. He's 6'11". He runs. He can dunk. He can jump. He can throw passes that are unbelievable, like some of the passing we see from some of the bigger players today, the larger players today. But he also just has an intensity about him on the basketball courts that's rare to see. The rarity of it is that Cooper Flagg hails from the state of Maine. And I think that this could be a first of all time. Maine is known for its lobster. Maine is not known for producing high-level Division I basketball talent. Cooper Flagg is the number one player in the country right now, and he hails out of the state of Maine. An interesting side note is I think there's a 1 and a 1A here, is that Carlos Boozer was a former player from Duke. He played for Coach Krzyzewski. Great player in his own right. Went into the NBA, I believe was an all-star on different occasions. Really forward, big, strong, tough player. He has two sons right now that are both twins, and they list one of his sons as the number 2 player behind Cooper Flagg. But right now, I would, after watching them both compete against each other last week a little bit during the live period in July, I really was impressed with both of these gentlemen, and I think that it has to be 1 and 1A because the young Boozer gentleman was really talented, strong, physical, has a body that's ready for college right now. And so the upside is if the Duke Nation can sign both of these players, I mean, they obviously have the edge. Carlos Boozer had twins. So there's 2 of them, and they're both really good. I would assume that Duke might have the inside track on them due to the historical perspective of the dad playing there, playing for Coach K, and now the new generation moving forward. And so I think Duke better check its payroll numbers too, because if they're going to have both Boozers and maybe Cooper Flagg in the mix, I don't know that that's the case right now with Cooper Flagg, but I would assume that he's giving consideration to Duke. That would be some class, obviously, to put forward, but also their general manager, who they have in store right now, better be able to negotiate that NIL money because they're all going to be players that are going to command the top dollar. And so that's the other piece of it, too. As you go into your new recruiting season, you need to have your budget available and you need to know exactly what you can spend, who to spend it on. It's a little bit like an NBA salary cap situation. So
I can't believe we're talking about this in the college ranks. It still blows my mind.
something has to be done. Again, week after week, I search for positives of the NIL. I'm going to give you another one that I came up with because this might create parity in the NCAA that has not really been there before. Let me explain. Years ago, and this is what I laugh about with all of the guys that I know in this business for years and years who've been in this business a long time and now have watched this transition, okay? The quote that I find the funniest that I've heard so far is that they had the NIL before the NIL was legal. And so they're talking about some of the college teams who had NIL before NIL, meaning they were inducing players long before the NIL became legal to do it.
Okay.
That was a handful of schools that did that.
They were called the blue chip schools.
The blue chip schools, some of them, you would hope that some of the blue chip schools were able to stay out of that nefarious activity. But the blue chip movie did illuminate to some of the underplay that goes on when trying to secure one of the top players in the country. And now it's legal, and so you're having this, but it could create some parity in the NCAA because now the morality of it has been taken out of it. Other teams, other universities wouldn't participate in the under-the-table NIL for morality reasons because they wanted to remain as pure as they could. Now, I can't tell you how many did. I wouldn't be able to give you an estimate of how many of the 300 schools, the 300-plus schools remained chaste to the NCAA rule book. I wouldn't be able to give you a figure on that, but I would say it's probably under 50%. And so that will give these other teams an ability to build up the NIL infrastructure and also now to legally compete with those other teams. Question being, will LIU ever be able to get enough NIL money that Kansas can get? And so will it all just stay the same? I don't know. But I think that the one side I wanted to point out was at least there's an opportunity for some of this to occur. I think the underside of what could occur, such as the gambling, we're seeing a lot of that right now. NFL players are being cited for gambling. So I think that's a real delicate walk for the NCAA right now because you're putting millions of dollars into the hands of gentlemen who are actually playing in the game and have a line that they can easily access and start to have input on the outcome of the game. That's really dangerous. The NBA for a long time has lost a lot of the basketball people, a lot of the people that enjoy basketball. A lot of people call it not basketball anymore, the NBA, and they've lost a lot of their core people because they've tried to be something different. And I'm afraid that the NCAA is walking down that same path, and that television contracts will always buttress and support the thing. But do you really have integrity? Do you really have the basketball fan that's really in your corner and really supporting your product because it has integrity associated with it? I think that's why people like March Madness, is because it does have integrity. It does have surprise to it. And I'd be interested to see as we move more towards this corporate setup where we're now treating everything in a business model and we're approaching everything in a business model. Return on investment is now trumping morality. And I think it's a precarious place for the NCAA right now. I think the NIL has kicked that door way open. I think the transfer portal has also lubricated that engine right now. And right now, it's just pretty much out of control. You're walking into a season right now in July and August without any understanding of what's going on right now with teams' rosters, the mobility of the rosters, who's going where, who's moving where. And some people might enjoy that. I think probably if you have a Twitter account and that's part of your job, to alert people to those things and be a basketball guru type person, I think that that's really cool because you got a lot to talk about. You got a lot to do. But it's almost breathtaking and impossible to keep up with on any type of depth of level where you have an understanding about what's really going on because it's so frequent, it's happening all over the place, and I think that that's a little bit dangerous. I did really, really enjoy watching Cooper Flagg play. I really enjoyed watching both Boozer twins play as well. I think that's exciting for the NCAA, but it's also, when you have the talent turning over as fast as it does, it's difficult to have, the Abdul Jabbar college career, the Pete Maravich college career that the records stand on. And so what I think you're seeing a little bit of right now is some of those records may be enshrined forever because the great players that have a chance to eclipse those records are never around long enough to eclipse those records.
They're bailing out too early, right?
Yeah, and you can't break records in 1 year, 2 years, and then wind up, in a situation. I was a little staggered to see that 6% of the portal goes to no school. I was staggered to see that. I would like to see some of the people that are leaving school right now that can't miss draft picks that didn't get drafted. That might be another show unto itself where people didn't get drafted and didn't get selected. And they were, as we said, can't miss. I always liken Felipe Lopez into that mix because I was a fortunate person to have Kenny Anderson worked with him at Archbishop Malloy, and he was an extremely great talent on the basketball court and was drafted very, very high. And what I saw happen in New York City after that was a little bit unfair to the gentleman that followed Kenny because everything became that comparison to him or to another great guard, Pearl Washington. And those were kind of the bars that were set, and that's like setting a bar for the next North Carolina player to come in and be Michael Jordan, or the next Laker player to come in and be LeBron James. When you set the bar that high, all you're doing is ensuring that people will fail. All you're doing is ensuring that people will miss. And so it was interesting to watch the future a little bit. I'll be real interested to see how long Governor Baker stays being president of the NCAA, what impact his time will have had. And in this moment right now, we need decisive leadership. We need executive authority. And right now, it doesn't seem like anybody has their hands on the wheel. So we'll just move into the section that we talked about last week, Pete, where we were talking about rosters, talking about the young players entering into the rosters. And we wanted to go through a little bit of who in the zone considers to be the top 25 players in the NBA right now. Arguably, you might say the top 25 players in the entire world. And when you take the entire basketball world that starts out at 8 and 10-year-old biddy basketball and move it all the way up into the mid-range teenage years and then get into really good high-level basketball, some of the prep schools that are out there right now, the NCAA, throw in Europe, the rest of the world, and say that there's 25 players of all of those people, that gives you an idea of just about how elite this group is, how much of a mountain that these gentlemen stand on in pursuing their dreams, going after their dreams, but also realizing their dreams. Something exciting about that. But this is rare. And I wanted to say that to all of the young men who pursue their basketball dreams. Do your homework. Do your schoolwork. Because not everybody gets to be one of these top 25 people. Because if they did, there'd be more than 25. There'd be more than 50 of the great players in the game. And what I say to these young men is, those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can be a really good academic student and a really good basketball player at the same time. I want to make a bit of a confession that concept was a little bit lost on me as a player. But what I found it later on in life was I had to apply my competitive instincts that I had on the basketball court to the classroom. Because when I saw an F come up or I saw a D come up, there's no way to say that you're in the top 25 of that group or you're in the top section of any of that group.
Right.
And for me, I guess that was always a little bit important. And so when I went back and did my master's degree, I did a whole lot better than I did earlier on because it became more important for me to be competitive in that environment. And so what I say to these young men is there's not a lot of more of your basketball side that you can explore when you get to college because you've grown as a player tremendously. And there's not a lot more that can be done to impart more knowledge, to import more skill set, to import anything in the basketball frame that's going to make you actually a much, much better player. Incrementally, you can grow as a player, certainly. It takes work, it takes time. But explore your intellectual side at college. That's my advice for people today. When you go to college, try not to think of yourself as an athlete. Try not to think of yourself as a basketball player. Think of yourself as an intellectual, because each and every one of the people on this earth has something to add to what we do. And if everybody thinks of themselves as an intellectual, everybody explores that side of themselves, that's how a team gets better. Each individual takes it upon themselves to get a little bit better. And you can't get much better in basketball, fellas. Go to college and really take the time to meet with your professors, explore their knowledge base set, and really, really get into an exploration of yourself. Because that's what college is all about. Because when you come out, there's not a whole lot of time left for self-exploration. I try and do a little bit of it every day, but each day becomes busy when you have a job, you have children, you have a golf course that you like to visit once in a while. That can eat up your day pretty quick. And so when you're looking at your time to self-evaluate and grow as a person, use college to explore your intellectual side. That's my little tidbit for today. But now we're going to jump into the top 25 players that we think are in the NBA right now. What I did was I took the first group and I kind of cordoned them off into a little bit of a segment where they're unto themselves. When I say the four names, you'll see that this top four probably, and what we talked about here was historical. What have you done? What are you currently doing? And what do we see you doing in the future? And when we talk about these young men, who aren't young men anymore, some of them, you're going to start to see the undershifting or the plate tectonics of the NBA and where it's starting to move and where it's starting to flow. And it's always in constant movement and in constant flow. And for all of those great LA Laker fans, I want to tell you that there will be a day that LeBron James doesn't play anymore. There'll be somebody new. That's the nature of what we do. That's the nature of the game of basketball. There'll always be somebody new. There was Willis Reed, and then there became Patrick Ewing and Bill Cartwright. There's always somebody new. That's the exciting part of the game. But as the NBA starts to look right now to what its immediate and possibly, say, 5-year future looks like, you have a number of the players that I'm going to mention right now that have 15-plus years in the league.
Yep.
You have a number of the players that I have right now that have 12-plus years in the league. Pete, what do you think is the average lifespan of a great NBA player?
Oh, great NBA player. I think the 12 to 15 is right about on the mark, if that much. I think personally it's more 8 to 12.
If they play in the Olympics?
If they play in the Olympics
In the summer? Add a
so
couple
now,
of those in?
So now you're dropping it down to like 7, 8 years
of prime time.
Yeah.
Okay. Would it surprise you that LeBron James is coming close to his 20th year in the NBA?
That's amazing.
Truly amazing. Steph Curry has been in the NBA now a long time. He still looks real young. Steph, he looks great.
Yep.
You know, and he looks young, but he's got a lot of miles in the NBA. He's certainly approaching some milestones and some records that are amazing. Now you go to Giannis Antetokounmpo. Of the first tier, he's probably the youngest star of all of it. And then you would throw in, I think, Jokic into that mix. I know Joel Embiid won the MVP this year. I personally didn't think he should have. And I think Jokic was a better pick because I think it's rare that you'll ever see anybody average a triple-double in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was this thing that was thrown around about stat padding, for Jokic. And I'm going to sit here as a person who's been involved in the game of basketball for over 50 years as a player and a coach and say that that is an absolute phantom. There's no such thing as stat padding. Now, years ago, let me explain what a little bit of that means. When they say stat padding, an assist, by its definition, an assist is something that leads directly to a basket. It means it's a pass that leads directly to a basket. If there's any more than one dribble involved in that action, even one dribble, it's not supposed to be considered an assist. So if I take the ball out of bounds, I throw it to John Stockton. He dribbles it 5 times, throws it to Karl Malone, who dribbles it 3 times to go in for a layup. That's not an assist.
Right, because he's doing a basketball move after the pass.
Correct, and you didn't directly aid to that basket. And so back in the day, there was all talk about when they had Magic in L.A., if Magic took the ball out of bounds and it led to a basket, they gave him an assist. If he touched the ball at all on that possession, they gave him an assist. I don't think that occurs too much, especially now, because so much of this is electronic. So much of this is done on the computer right now. And so there is still a human inputting it. But I think the stats these days that you're looking at are pretty solid stats. And when they say that he was padding his stats, I think that's just a way to criticize somebody who's doing something really good. And it's hard to criticize him. If you wanted to tear him down and say Joel Embiid had a better year, you can go ahead and say that. But to say that there was padding of his stats and to say that a gentleman who averages a triple-double shouldn't be considered for MVP is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. So I have Jokic in my top group. I have Antetokounmpo in my top group. I have LeBron James in the top group. And I have Steph Curry in my top 4. Right now, that's kind of the way I see it. Now, there are numbers to support that. Jokic has a triple-double, averaged. Giannis Antetokounmpo averaged 31 points and 12 rebounds, had numbers on assists that were very, very low, but his blocks per game are decent as well. In this next group that I'm going to throw in there, I think it's important to look that group gets really, really young too. I really, really think Luka Doncic from the Mavericks is an elite player in the NBA. I think he's done some incredibly, incredibly great things. You and I talked about the addition of Kyrie Irving to that team, which didn't seem to help. But Doncic was hurt a little bit during that time. I think he's a real impact player.
Well, it's also about who Kyrie is, too. The personalities have to, get involved in this as well.
No doubt. And that's what people, when you're building these franchises, and I've alluded to the Brooklyn Nets on a number of different occasions, but when you're building these franchises and you say, just put the best players we can get out on the floor, that is absent of basketball knowledge. Because what we'll talk about maybe later in the show is how do you build a basketball team? How do you build a championship basketball team that works? If you put your 5 best scorers out on the floor, you're not going to win.
Yep.
If you don't have somebody who can block shots and rebounds, you're not going to win. If you don't have someone who's a distribution analyst, you're not going to win. Somebody who says, okay, I take the ball and I give it to the really good players. Because in a game, you'll have somewhere between maybe 75 to 90. I would say in an NBA game, it might be closer to up to 90. But that's the only amount of shot attempts you have in a game. And so if you have 90 shot attempts in a game and you have 5 players, who gets 20 shots? Who gets 15? Who gets 10? Who gets 2?
And if the majority of that percentage goes to one player, now a defense can key in on that player and take him out.
It's certainly why the Denver Nuggets had their great success, Pete.
Yeah.
We've talked about that because you couldn't key on them too much. If you keyed on Jokic, he had other guys that were available to do that. I think the Lakers are experiencing a little bit of that in LeBron James's final year, although they threw in Anthony Davis, and he's certainly a great talent, albeit he gets injured quite a bit. I think they need to have a better supporting cast around LeBron James right now, and it's not there. Just as we talked about with Victor Wembanyama going into the Spurs, he's gonna not have a good first year. He might be Rookie of the Year, but I doubt that the Spurs make the playoffs with the team that they have currently.
Yep.
So we'll see. In the next group, and this is something that I love about basketball, is that this next group might be in the first group, and the first group might be in the next group. But I think if you say right there that you have the four of Giannis, Joker, LeBron, and Steph, there's not going to be a ton of argument about that. As we start to slip through it a little further, I think you might see some argument. So in that next group, if you had Joel Embiid, who was the MVP this year, the big man for the 76ers, I'll say the same thing to the 76ers that I'll say to the Lakers. You need better cast around him. They're locking up some big-time dollars in some of their players, and I just don't see it. And if you want to blame Kyrie Irving and say that he's a bit of a problem in the locker room, I think you have to look at James Harden a little bit in that same way, because James Harden has been on a number of different teams. He was on that net team, and everybody wants to throw a lot of the shade on Kyrie for that failure. But Kevin Durant was in that locker room, and so is James Harden. And now James Harden has moved teams again, and now he's with Philadelphia, and I just don't think coaches know what to do with him, because he has so much attention of the basketball in his hands. And he's a great player, certainly, but he's a very dominant player as well. And so when you mix him in with Embiid and some other guys, it's what we're talking about of the chemistry of basketball. It doesn't always match when you put all the five best players. You know, they're trying to build these super teams. Certainly if you walk into the building and you see LeBron James and all the great players on one team, that's awesome, you know. I
Yep.
just don't know that that's the best basketball, you know. And I think Mike Malone and the Nuggets hit it right about on the number. You know, they had great players, and then they had some other players that were really good that they convinced to be complementary players. That's when you can be great. If you can convince great players to be complementary players, that's when you're going to be a really deep team. That's when you're going to bring guys off your bench who are going to be just as good as the guys you're bringing in as starters. And so that's, I think, where the Nuggets kind of wound up. And so we're talking about Embiid. I think if he had better players around him, he might move into that top echelon of the top four. I think in time he certainly does. But if you put Luka and Joel Embiid in that group, I think you would throw Jason Tatum in there, most likely,
Okay.
in that top group. We talked about the Celtics. If you had to flip a coin and say, we're going to keep Tatum or Brown, I'm taking Tatum every single day of the week, because I think he's an elite player. There is some criticism about his playoff performances. I think the Celtics need better players around him as well. But I would certainly consider him to be the franchise player there and consider him to be in this next group. So you have Luka, you have Embiid, you have Jason Tatum, you know, in that next group. And I'm going to throw Kevin Durant in there, in that next spot. I think he could be higher a little bit, but I think there's some health concerns that I have with him. When you don't train, you know, and Kevin had trouble in the weight class when he first came into the league, and people dismissed it because he was a great player. But when you don't train your body at an elite level in the NBA, it has a tendency to break down. It has a tendency to not be durable. And when you saw Kevin Durant going in on layup line this year and having a bit of a problem, you know, just with no contact and just jogging and taking a layup, that kind of startling to look at and say, where will the other injuries come from?
Right.
What will be the other things that
What's the
kinda-
next shoe to
that,
drop?
That kind of slows him down.
Yep.
Right. You know, so you have that 8, you know, if you will, you know, as our top group. I think that there's some players here that we're going to mention next that are players that are the young players that are coming up into the NBA that are certainly now going to take the mantle from this group that we just mentioned, because as we said, LeBron James has been in the league for a really, really long time. So has Anthony Davis now. Steph Curry been in the league a really, really long time. Giannis Antetokounmpo might be one of the players that you considered into that, because you also have to give consideration to what type of game does the player have. If it's attacking the basket, dunking, all of those hard landings you're going to take on your body, no matter how strong you are, no matter how big you are, your body's going to break down at some point. If you're more of a skill-driven player, I think you have a better chance to survive for a long, long time in the NBA. If you've watched LeBron James's career over the time that he's been in the league, he has kind of morphed his game from more of a player that was out on the floor in transition, dunking, making things happen with the basketball. He's become more of a perimeter player, more of a player relying on the jump shot and his skill set to keep him in the game a little bit longer, I think. And I think that was something that was intelligent on his part. As we go into this next segment, we're going to look at Damian Lillard, who's at the Portland Trailblazers, possibly being requesting a trade. He's certainly one of the best players in the NBA. If you have him with Scoot Henderson, as I said this to the Portland Trailblazers before, I'll give them another shout out today. Keep them. Keep both of them and see if it works, because those are two unbelievably dynamic guards to have in your backcourt. And you have the opportunity for Lillard to mentor Scoot Henderson as he comes into the league, which is ideal. You want a superstar there that can show these other players what the league is like and how to present themselves and how to have success in the league. There's a funny story about Shaquille O'Neal. When he was with the Lakers, they drafted a gentleman who's a college coach right now by the name of Mark Mad Dog Madsen. And Mad Dog was a favorite of everybody. He was from Stanford. He was a big 6'8" guy that just played with a total reckless abandon, hence the name Mad Dog. But when Mad Dog came into the NBA, Mad Dog came into the NBA holding on to his first communion money. Mad Dog came into the NBA not wanting to spend a dime. And Mad Dog would come in with a beat-up old car and come in sweatsuits and stuff like that. And there's a story about Shaquille O'Neal bringing him in and saying, "Hey, Mad Dog, this is the NBA now." And Mad Dog going, "No, Shaq, I got to be responsible. I don't know how long I'll be in the league. I'm not a superstar like you. Just being really responsible." So Shaquille O'Neal takes him out to a car dealership and goes over to the car dealership and says, "Okay, I'm going to buy this from Mad Dog today." And so he goes and he buys Mad Dog a car. Then he takes him shopping. They get a couple of suits and everything. He buys Mad Dogs a suit. So that's the stuff in the NBA that you don't always hear about, those really cool stories. But it's that mentorship.
It probably doesn't happen very often either.
Probably less and less, but Shaquille O'Neal, I have the sense, was a really, really good guy to be in the locker room around, and a great player in his own right. But that story always kind of stuck with me. I think if there was more of that, I think there's a lot of that goes on in the NBA. They just don't talk about it. But I'm going to go with Lillard. Ja Morant really belongs in this mix, maybe even a little higher. I don't know what's going to happen with him. He's been suspended for a number of games last year. I want to say it's almost half the season. And I just don't know what's going to happen with him with his off-court stuff. And it boggles my mind that you would have an opportunity like this young man has and kind of, I got to be honest, let it slip a little bit. So missing 42 games next year, missing 42 games is at the first time you'd say, okay, let's knock it off. Let's not make that same mistake again. And then we say, okay, now we make the same mistake again. And now we're at the 42 game level or almost a half a season that your teammates aren't going to have their best player out on the floor. It's one of those things that's probably inevitable. It's probably not stoppable, but I just think I hope and I pray that the NBA can, and I know they do a great job with the players that come in. I know they do a really good job with them in training and doing that stuff, but so much of it just is you become a target when you have that much money because there's always looking for somebody to sue you. And that's the piece of it that's a little bit dangerous out there for some of these young men. But I'm going to throw Ja in there, and I think his numbers are certainly representative of that. You know, when we go to the next group, some of the names, you're going to say, "Oh, who's this guy?" Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is at Oklahoma City Thunder. He's having an amazing career. He's doing some great things, and he's a guy that's been in the league just a bit of a short time. He has emerged as one of the best players in the NBA right now. It's a name, it's not a household name that everybody has, I'm sure, but keep an eye on him because I see him really, really developing into a player because he's a bucket. He's a little bit like Carmelo Anthony in that he's a bucket. He put the ball in his hands, he can score the basketball. And that's not, everybody wants to shoot. Not everybody puts it in. And this guy can put the ball in the basket and has done very, very well for himself. Domantas Sabonis for the Kings has had an amazing, amazing career. Very, very quietly in the NBA. I bet most fans don't even know his name. He's just a big, big five-man. He's a center, but he can step out and shoot the basketball. His numbers just have been really, really good. I mean, and I see him as we go forward in the future, one of the only players that's a low post center right now that has the ability to go inside and mix it up and be a low post center. Karl Anthony Towns, a little similar, a little bit older of a player, but Karl can go inside. He likes to spend a little bit more of his time outside now. But if you look in the NBA right now, it's kind of bereft of NBA low post centers in the traditional fashion. And I think that's missing from the game a little bit. The Warriors went Euro, and as I said, there are no geniuses. Everybody just follows. Everybody just flows. I think in the NBA, especially if you had the right person, you can build around a big man. You can build around a really good big man. That's the formula that used to happen in the past. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, they were the stars of their team. They were the centers. I don't think you can name a center right now that's, you would say is a marquee star of their team. It's really just the forwards and the guards right now that are dominating the game. And I think an NBA franchise might be smart to kind of go back and move away from not everybody has to be Euro. Not everybody has to be the Warriors. Not everybody has the talent to do that as well. Those are elite shooters on that team, and they're able to do that because they have elite shooters. If you don't have elite shooters, you might not want to run that offense. But what happens is coaches will move that way and say, yeah, we're going to run the Warriors offense this year, and we're going to run Michigan's offense this year with Coach Beeline years ago. Half the time, they don't even know what the other team's actually doing. Because when you watch a basketball game, to scout a basketball game, it's almost impossible to tell whether that was a set play or whether that was just a player ad-libbing in the play. You don't know if that's the way it's designed. If you watch the UConn Huskies play this year, one of the things I'm doing this summer is my assistant coach, Wes Jackson, got me this little computer gig thing this year. And it's got all of the plays on it that these teams run. It has their entire playbook on it. And they sell them now. And so Wes was nice. He got it for me as a present. And so this is how I've been spending my summer. But I'm looking at the various teams in the NCAA tournament and their whole playbook. If you look at UConn's playbook, I mean, it's massive. It's massive. There's 50, 60, 70 different combinations and plays in there. And then if you look at this and then extrapolate it back out to watch their team, it's really difficult to see, okay, Jordan Hawkins comes off that screen, they hit him, okay, that was part of their horn set, But then Jordan Hawkins pulls the ball down, brings it to the other side, finds one of his teammates on the other side. That's them ad-libbing and being basketball players. And so that's the part of it that's become a little bit difficult for me, is that teams have such great players. They more or less are doing outlines, I think, than they're doing specific plays, meaning here's our outline, here's what we want to do, now make reads, and now make adjustments. See what the defense does, and then adjust to it. And that's kind of where basketball's gotten better, I think, is the players making better reads. But I also think that there's room in the NBA for them to differentiate and not everybody go the same way. Because right now, a bunch of you have your big guys outside shooting three balls, and they're not drawing iron. They're not hitting the net. They're shooting air balls. And nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to watch that. And so we'll keep moving through the list here, but I like Sabonis a lot. Kawhi Leonard, let's give him a shout. He's a great player for the Clippers, has had some injury problems. Back in the day, I thought this young man was going to emerge as the next NBA great player. Had some injuries, had some difficulties, but on a given night, when you say bucket, this guy's the bucket. Kawhi Leonard can really score the basketball, and he's a gentleman that's really, really difficult to defend. There are great scorers like Reggie Miller was a great shooter of the basketball and a great scorer. But at a certain time, he wasn't that difficult to defend because he had trouble putting the ball on the floor. This guy can do it all, and that's why he's really, really difficult to defend, I think. Donovan Mitchell from the Cavaliers has had an amazing, amazing transition there. They traded for him, and they brought him in there. And I think he's just done some really, really good stuff there. He scored 70 points in a game this year. He's
Wow.
6'5". He can take it to the basket. He can dunk. He's from New York, so I didn't want to give him any kind of New York bump here because I can be swayed sometimes when I see New York players because I love the way they play. But I think that when you're looking at his game, he can really, really do a lot of things. And right now, the Cavaliers don't have anybody really around him. They need to improve that. But this is what you're seeing in the NBA is it's becoming so bifurcated. It's becoming so split between the haves and the have-nots. There isn't a lot of great players to go around. And now you're seeing teams watered down. You're seeing teams not the same. And so when you look at, a Kawhi Leonard, and some of these other players, they're aging. Does the NBA have this? Does the NBA have the younger talent that's going to buttress that? LeBron James has been the face of the NBA for a very, very long time.
Who backfills the current talent?
Who's going to be that next guy? And right now, if you look in the NBA, you can pick a couple of different players, but Jason Tatum's going to be maybe that next guy. I want to give Celtics fans something to be hopeful for. Jason Tatum's a great player, and he can do everything on the basketball court. And as he grows and gets older, he's going to mature into a really, really good NBA player. I think John Morant has the same ability because of his athleticism. I think that he's going to have to grow a little bit as a person before we can put him into that elite category, though. So Anthony Davis with the Lakers, I love him. He's hurt all the time. That's the thing that I have a problem with him the most. But he is probably the most skilled low post player in the NBA right now. He's absolutely devastating in the low post when he gets the ball in the right spot. What I talk to players about all the time, if you want to be a good low post player and you want to be somebody that because guards are always worried about throwing the ball to big men because A, big men don't have the best hands, and B, they don't establish position where the guard can get them the ball in the right spot. And so if I'm a point guard and I come down and I'm looking at my big man, I want to know that he owns the block. There's a reason that there are 3 stripes that go down the lane line, and one of the stripes is about 2 inches in width. The next one is about 2 inches in width. The last one down there, that it separates the free throw shooting when you do the free throw shooting where you stand. But the second one down there is about 2 inches wide as well, 3 inches wide as well. And then you have the last one, which is a block that goes, it's probably about 6 to 8 inches wide long. And so what we call that in coaching the block, that's the optimal spot to catch the basketball on the floor, especially if you're 6'11", 7 foot, and maybe even left-handed. So the left-hand guys in the post are so hard to guard. They're just so quick with their footwork, and they can get in there, and it's not what you're used to seeing because you're used to seeing somebody shoot right-handed most of the time. That left hand can get up there real quick and get a shot off. And so that's kind of the NBA frame right now. But I think when you have Anthony Davis, he owns the block the best in the NBA right now. When your guards are looking at him to feed into the post, they're looking at somebody who's 6'11", spread out wide, ready to receive the ball. Now, this young man has great hands, probably the best hands of if you measured hands of big men in the NBA, he'd be in your top 5. And when he gets an angle, it's going to go and dunk. What I would like to see a little bit more with him, and the Lakers utilize him a little bit more, is in that mid-range area, and when he can step up to the foul line and shoot a little bit there. He shoots the ball pretty good. I think that might keep him a little healthier. When you're a low-post player, one of the things that happens is you step on a lot of people's feet. And when you step on people's feet when you're a basketball player, you have a tendency to sprain your ankle or hurt your foot or do something like that. And that's one of the problems in low-post plays, because guys are getting jostled and bumped around so much. They have a tendency to get a little hurt down there. I'd like to see Davis, and maybe to keep him a little healthier, get into that mid-range stuff. But he's a stud. He's an absolute stud. This gentleman would have to be much, much higher in the group based on what he did in the playoffs. Jimmy Butler from the Miami Heat. We can make a little bit of adjustments here in the group. But, you know, he's this very, very talented player, very, very solid player all the way through. He doesn't have a lot of weakness in the game. And one of the things, you know, coaches will call some players dogs. And that used to be detrimental. That used to be, oh, my God, he's a dog. That meant that he didn't play hard and he wasn't a guy that you could count on every possession. Now they call them dogs, but they got a W in there. And if you're a dog with a W, that means you play really hard. That means you're really good.
You're a
That
down
means
and dirty dog.
You're a down and dirty dog, and you get after it. And that's the new phrase. Jimmy Butler's a dog. Jimmy Butler is an absolute dog. You got to throw Harden into that mix as well, I think. Anthony, you know, James Harden, Anthony, a lot of these guys, they're enigmatic. A lot of times coaches don't know what to do with them. I think Victor Wembanyama, you know, that's maybe the reason they asked Popovich to stay around, because he has more of a skilled hand with that. But the biggest issue with Victor Wembanyama is going to be in utilization. What do you utilize him as? He's not a center at 7'5". Where are you going to put him? I think that's the biggest question that the Spurs are going to have. Same thing a little bit with Harden. Where do you put him? And if you do, you're going to have to get used to him having the ball in his hands for 24-second clock. He's going to own the ball for 10 or 12 of those seconds. And that's tough to develop team rhythm that way. And so the other thing with Harden, he's a great player, but utilization's a problem there. And as a coach, you don't like to have those utilization issues. You like to know what people do, and you like to be able to make them a little bit better at what they do. But when you can't figure out what somebody does, that's a problem. And so I think that's a challenge for Wembanyama, and I think that's been a challenge for Harden as well. I just don't think teams know what to do with him because he dominates the ball to such a fashion. Bam Adebayo. I've always liked this young man's game. He's a real low post guy, but he's probably more of a power forward body. But he plays inside, and he's strong, physical. Had a great playoff run. Everybody was very intrigued with Jimmy Butler's play. But I think if you go back and watch the games that were there and watch some of the different stuff that happened there, I think Adebayo has really stepped up as far as NBA caliber. Certainly belongs in the top 25 in the league right now. I like his game. I like his future. Zach LaVine from the Bulls is a super shooter of the basketball. Doesn't make great decisions, I don't think, with the basketball, but he's really good with the basketball as far as scoring the basketball. I know that he has, you know, close to a mega $1 million contract out there in Chicago. Another player possibly that could benefit from having a little bit more around him. Right now, I don't see the supporting cast there being that great for him. Do you want to put Kyrie Irving in the top 25, Pete?
Pure talent-wise, yes. What all the entire player, just outside of the top 25.
He averaged 27 points a game.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of the problem. You don't want your point guard, and I'm old school about this a little bit, but it's certainly somebody has to be in charge of distribution. Somebody has to be in charge of distribution. And so I think that that's important, that somebody on that team is really, really going to do that. When you put the ball in a guard's hands and they don't distribute the basketball, they shoot it all the time, I think that's problematic, especially if you're Luka Doncic and other great players. If I was Kyrie Irving and I played on the Washington Bullets, the Wizards, the old Bullets, if I played on that team, I'd shoot the ball every single time I touched it because it didn't have the supporting cast there. But when you have a supporting cast and you're the point guard, you're really a distributor of the basketball. You're the one who makes the decisions about who gets the shots. And somebody has to do that job for the team to function well. That's just old school basketball. And the more you have a gentleman who has 27 points a game from the point, I think you're going to see that be problematic for their team, especially if they have other great players, and they do. Paul George from the Clippers, another great player, with Kawhi Leonard. A lot of times now he's getting older, he's aging, certainly one of the great scorers in the last 10 years of the basketball. He can absolutely light your team up when he gets going. Another thing but where are the Clippers going? With Kawhi Leonard aging and injured often, and now you have this gentleman aging, Paul George aging and often injured. Where are they going with their franchise? What are they doing with this? And so it'll be interesting to see how they kind of entangle from that, because what happens also is you sign somebody to a mega contract and they play 40 games a year, play 50 games a year. That's detrimental to your team, and I get it that guys get hurt, but the NBA has a bunch of phantoms in it, and NBA has a bunch of guys who just take time off because they don't feel like playing. And that's not cool. And if you're making that kind of money, that's what I'd be real careful about if I was an NBA general manager. You brought up the fact that Giannis Antetokounmpo played in 81 games this year. He logged in and went to work and did the job, got paid money. The piece of it is because fans actually come to see the great players play. They come to the game because they want to see LeBron. And when LeBron's not there 30 times, that impacts their experience as far as the game goes. So Paul George will put him in there. Zion Williamson probably would close out the group right now. I don't know what's happening with this young man as far as his career, his injuries, his ability to stay untrained, and still be a great player. I mean, that's interesting. It's real interesting. So I think he's certainly a great player and probably belongs higher on the list than 25. But that was the group we put together.
Yep.
I kind of liked it. It really is worth discussion around it and some good stuff like that. But I wanted to just take a part of the show right now, and I have some really great friends in this business that have been involved in basketball and in some really different ends of basketball, some in the production end of basketball, the television end of basketball, and all great people. And what we do is I send the show out to people that I know and that I respect a great deal. And what I do is I ask them to tear me up. I ask them to give me all of the feedback that they can give me in order for me to get better at doing this. And so I say to people all the time, I was coached my whole life. So criticizing me, don't feel bad about it, because I was criticized and coached my whole life, and that made me a better person and a better basketball player. And so what I did was I sent it on to some different people. And there's one gentleman in this group, and I'm not going to name names here, but there's one gentleman in this group that has come back and given me some unbelievable feedback. And at different times, a little hard to listen to, because you're talking about yourself and saying, oh my God, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you got to do this better, you got to do that better. And I've come into this as a neophyte. I come into this as a baby, and so I'm willing to listen to anybody who can help make me better. And so one of the things that occurred was, as I sent the video out, this gentleman came back and said, facts matter, Rich. On your show, you have to get things right. We called Angela Reese. I made some other missteps on the show that have been since pointed out to me. I'm going to label those because I like to be able to say to the people, I want to present the truth here about basketball. That's what I really want to do. I want to present the truth to people. And so as much as I can do that, my mistakes are not intentional. My mistakes are my brain starts bouncing around in my head while I'm doing this show, having such a great time.
Do they know we're not really editing this show?
That we just and so, but we're going to label them, and I'm going to label them after him, and we're going to call them, instead of mistakes, we're going to label them Chris Steaks, and he's going to let me know when I mess up. He's going to let me know when my facts aren't straight, and we're going to come back on the next show, and we're going to clean up our Chris Steaks if we have them.
Okay.
All right? So the guy's a great guy. I love him, and I just wanted to mention tonight that that's a little bit of my process here. I want to be criticized. I want people to tell me how to get better because I really enjoy what I'm doing here, and I really, really am having fun with it. So the more interaction we have with our fans, the better. The more that people come to me and say, hey, Rich, why don't you think about this? Rich, why don't you think about that? I love it because we're always looking to implement new things here and do new things here. So, Pete, I think we got about 5 minutes left.
You are correct.
Okay. I wanted to talk about a couple of more players that I think are undrafted that are certainly players that NBA general managers might want to get their arms around. I was really high on this young man. And I think this is part of what I say about the bias that goes towards NCAA players. The fact that this young man went undrafted, I thought was a little bit mysterious to me. DeAndre Williams from Memphis is 6'10", shoots the ball great. They drafted Noah Clowney 21st from the Brooklyn Nets. This gentleman's a lot like Noah Clowney. Really, really tall, long, can play, can put it on the floor, has an NBA-ready style. So I was surprised that he wasn't drafted out of Memphis. I really like this young man a lot. I think an NBA general manager would do a good job to pick up on him. I also want to talk about Terquavion Smith, undrafted. This young man, I think because he was 165 pounds, possibly soaking wet, the NBA people were a little bit concerned about that. I think this young man can put the ball in the bucket at a very elite level, and I think he is somebody worth inviting to your camp. Mikey Miles, certainly out of TCU, an unbelievable college career. Somebody call him up. Somebody give him a shot. I really, really enjoy one of the things that's happening right now. We go back. I really like it when we're right. I like it when we're wrong. People will point it out, but I like it when we're right. And what some of the people are saying right now is Leonard Miller is absolutely blowing up the summer league. Leonard Miller is one of the best picks in the NBA draft, and we said all along that Leonard Miller was going to be a great pick. We really like Azuolas Tubelis as well. And he went undrafted. I don't know why, but the other player that we liked is Vukcevic.
You're still struggling with that one.
Vukcevic. And he was the Serbian player that we were in love with, and he was drafted 42nd, just like the Joker was. And so he's blowing up right now, too. So two of the guys we gave you, Leonard Miller and Vukcevic, have really, really blown up. I think this young man could really surprise. Azuolas Tubelis. He played at Arizona, has great numbers. I think you might want to give him a shot. All right, we talked about what makes a great team. How do you put together a championship program? How do you put together a team that really, really plays together and for itself? One of the things that I'm going to throw out is that you want your basketball team to be unselfish. You don't want people to care who gets the credit, because when you win, there's enough credit to go around for everybody. But when you lose, there's no credit for anybody. Okay, so this is how I try and build a basketball team. This is how I'm currently trying to build some things at Westfield. And for the young coaches out there, take notice of a little bit of this, is that it doesn't always have to be your 5 best players that start the game. I know that's controversial with the players, but as a coach, it doesn't always make it your top scorers, your top talented players that have to mix, because there are certain aspects of basketball where you have to have certain roles played, or otherwise you won't win. And rebounding and assists and block shots and all of those things are part of it that are equally as important as scoring in order to formulate the whole championship formula. So what you want to do is you want to have a distribution analyst as your guard. You want to have somebody who gets the ball, doesn't care if they score a ton of points, but they're the distribution analyst. So as a coach, I say, this player has to get 15 shots a game. This player has to get 17 shots a game. I don't want this player shooting 3 balls at all. That's my distribution analyst. That's my coach on the floor. That's the young man that I want to talk to about whatever set plays we might run, any defensive changes we might want to have. That's going to be the extension of me on the floor. But you need a distribution analyst for that. The second piece is I love it when you have what I refer to as an absolute penetrating expert. This gentleman is like a sniper. He knows how to get inside of defenses. He knows how to penetrate defenses and make things happen. He's the guy that can stir the drink for you. And it's got to be that absolutely penetrating expert, because sometimes it's the right time to penetrate and other times it's the right time to kick it or shoot it or make other decisions. But you need an absolute penetrating expert. I like to have what I refer to as just sniper. This young man's job is to shoot the basketball. He's a sniper. When your guards and your other players are penetrating and the defense collapses and closes them down, this is the gentleman that we find to shoot the ball from the outside. He's our just sniper position. He has to be able to shoot the ball at a very, very high level. You have to be above 40% from three-point range in order to take that spot, because you're going to shoot the preponderance of the most three-point shots. So you look at it and say, how many three-point shots do you want to take in a game? I like 20 or 30. You know, this year we're going to shoot a lot more, but I like 20 or 30. You're a sniper guy. Your sniper better be able to put up 7 or 8 of those. Your sniper better be able to put up 7 or 8 and make half of them, or close to half of them. Okay? The next thing you need is you need what we call a board hound. You know, somebody who sniffs rebounds. You know, he's just like a golden retriever out there, just sniffing rebounds and blocking shots and doing all that good stuff.
Just seems to materialize under the basket, right?
Around the basket,
Yeah.
Somebody who's your protector of the rim. You know, we talk about the paint as being a bit of the holy grail. We don't want people defensively. We don't want them in our paint. And also defensively, we don't want people at the holy grail as well. Okay? But when you put all that together, you got to have that one other piece that's a lethal weapon, a player who can do it all. And when you get to that lethal weapon position and add that in, when that person believes in your program, when that person comes to your program, might even be a little bit above being in a Division III program. When that person makes that decision to walk the divergent path, that's your lethal weapon. That's your guy that you can use to break down all doors. That's your guy that can lead to championships. And when you have other players in your group that are understanding of that young man's talent and coalesce to that young man's talent, such as Michael Jordan, such as Kobe Bryant, such as LeBron James, the rest of the players coalesce around that talent. That's what you need to form a team. I'm a minute over. I wanted to get to that. I appreciate everybody. Welcome to In the Zone next week. We're gonna hustle a little bit to try and make things work, but Pete's going to Florida. We're gonna make it happen. Thanks again for a great week.